All right, welcome everybody. We're here for another of our weekly live sessions. We are a little bit earlier than normal today. All right, just because, well, it's even though it's a Saturday, we still have client stuff to take care of, and we'll be on with a client in a little while. So I had to do the video a little bit earlier. All right, so today we are talking about five strategies, that's going to help you get past the integration phase your after you've sold your business, after you've gone through the mergers and acquisition process. All right, we're going to cover five very specific things. And, even if you are a brand new agency or if you're not even thinking at all about selling your business yet, this is a very important video for you to watch because we're going to talk about things that you should keep in mind for when the time of the sale comes. If if you are in your planning phases still and you haven't even opened up your doors, or you're just in the first few months of your business, you're still in that honeymoon phase, so to speak, you should still pay attention to some of the things that we're talking about here because we all exit our business at one point or another, and we need to be aware of that. Okay. Whether you exit your business because you've unfortunately passed away, because you're retiring, or because you've sold it or passed it along to an heir, you need to be aware of some of these points. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is, when does integration planning actually begin? Okay. That's point one. The first thing you have to keep in mind is that integration should be a 90-day process. So, at the very minimum, 90 days before your closing, once you've already uncovered all the skeletons, you've finalized the negotiations, you're now moving into those final phases before closing on the deal. You're doing the final due diligence and everything else is going along well. You need to make sure that it starts. Okay. This is incredibly important because if you wait until after integration is done and you haven't begun the integration process during the diligence phase, that final phase where you're going through, then you're not going to have a clear roadmap and you're going to end up with, a lot of confusion, and you're going to end up with, a lot of chaos when this transaction is over and you are now the new owner. All right. So having this roadmap, understanding that integration planning needs to start during the early due diligence phase. What it's going to do, it's going to set clear expectations for what should be happening day one of you being the new owner. All right. So now this brings us to the next question. Well, who should be leading integration? That's really going to depend. Okay. A lot of times, some owners that are very experienced in doing this, they don't mind getting their hands dirty. They will come in and integrate the two businesses themselves. If you are highly experienced at this and you've gone through the process, and go ahead, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as again you have assigned leadership, you have assigned accountability, and your person or team is able to coordinate between the departments of the previous company with the merger, when you're merging it in with the new company, and they're very adamant and very good about keeping track of all the KPIs and that the transitional milestones are all met. So again, sometimes the owners are really good at doing this. Other times you will have companies like mine, you'll have how people will hire consultants to come in and take care of this. And other times, in larger corporate entities, they will actually have designated integration teams where these are teams that they're seasoned, they know what they're doing, and they're easily able to bring together all the moving parts. So, this all begins though once you have your post-transaction playbook, so to speak, in play. All right. And you have a roadmap of what needs to happen starting day one of you taking over as the new ownership. You start to make that plan. You've designated who's leading the integration, whether it's you as an owner, whether you hired a consulting company, or you're a large corporate entity and you have the designated team in place to do this. Or even if you're not a large corporate entity, but let's say you have a very aggressive growth plan by acquisition, you want to make sure that all of these things are in play. You might have a team in place. So, and it all begins by making sure that you have your priorities straight. So, your day one messaging is absolutely critical for this. All of your staff, your referral sources, everybody needs to be reassured as to what's going on. Everybody needs clarity in the process. You want to make sure that your operations and your communications and that your workflows are all stable in order to avoid any major disruptions. Okay, I've been through a couple of transitions throughout my career, a number of them at this point, but early on, some of my first transitions that I went through, there was one company that it was just awful. I was uh I was a staff member. I wasn't even a consultant at that point, and it was probably my first or second transaction that I've ever been through. The owners did not plan at all for a solid transition, and I found myself with the owner standing in an empty room, because there was no plan, there was no communication. The even the sale itself was dropped as a surprise on the existing staff. So all of these things became chaotic. They lost probably about 50-60% of their client base within the first 3 months as a result. And it was all directly attributed to not having a clear plan and not focusing in on the priorities of making sure that communications operations were all stable and that you had things in place. All right. Point number two. Let's talk about your staff and your culture. You know, if when we're talking about staff and culture, when it comes to the M&A process, the existing staff in that company or the staff you're bringing in, they are the key to retention and maintaining morale. So you want to make sure that you have strategies in place to retain the top caregivers and office personnel. They are the backbone of the business. That may be, it may require simple things like just offering a retention bonus, um, in order to get people to stay after the transition is over. This is particularly I found this to be particular issue, especially with office staff. They get a little nervous that they think they're going to lose their job. You want to reassure them. You want to have very clear communication. You want them to be involved to a certain extent in creating or communicating the new vision and to make sure everybody um that everybody just stays put until you guys finish figuring everything out. By this point, you should already know who's staying and who's going, because let's be realistic. If you're coming in, you're buying an existing agency, that core staff, that back office staff, that core group of caregivers, without them, your quality and your continuity of care are going to suffer tremendously. And that's going to impact the reputation of the company and a number of other things. Okay. So you want to make sure that you're also able to manage any culture clashes between existing staff and the new staff. Okay. So differences, you'll have new people in place. You'll have new people that are going to have to interact and work with each other but more than likely have never worked together before. And that means you have differences in leadership style, differences in your processes, differences in the values, and that can cause a lot of friction. Acknowledging and aligning all of this early on helps prevent disengagement and it helps prevent what's commonly referred to today as the quiet quitting process, where people they start doing the bare minimum. You see them performing less than how the previous ownership maybe said they were accustomed to those people performing, and they're just quietly using your paycheck to find another job. These are the things that you really want to make sure are just avoided at all costs. And the way you do this is, again, transparent communications. Make sure that if you're not planning on firing any of the staff, that that is absolutely crystal clear, because there will always be that person that starts spreading fear rumors, and you'll have sudden resignations as a result of it. You know, at the end of the day, silence breeds anxiety. So the best way to combat that is having honest, open communication to minimize the rumors and to build trust across the entire organization. Okay. Point number three, your systems and your operations. You got to make sure that your technology and your workflows, that all of this aligns between your way of doing things and the new company. So if you're buying an existing company and this is your first purchase, it's easier to do, easier to manage. Now, if you're already a multi-unit owner and you're coming in and taking over something or absorbing this other company in, this becomes absolutely critical. There's going to be challenges, integrating potentially the EMR systems, integrating the billing, the payroll, different scheduling platforms. You got to sit there and figure out if it makes sense to, unify the systems with what you already have if this is a merger situation, or if you just want to temporarily run dual systems until you get things up and going. you know it's not always as easy as it seems. Or let's say you're a new owner, single unit, you've just purchased an existing and up running business. You have to take the time to learn what processes are in place. And if you don't like, for example, the scheduling software, and you want to switch from scheduling software A to scheduling software B, or your EMR system, all of these things, you want to do it slowly. You don't want to come in like a bull in a china shop and start, wrecking everything. And no, we're going to start all over. It just doesn't make sense, and it leads to a bad transition. So, the you want to make sure while you're doing all of this and you're aligning all the technology, you want to make sure that you are upgrading or updating certain systems. Like, for example, if you are buying a business, you got it at a good price because throughout your process, you found out that they're still running scheduling and payroll off of Excel files. I mean, hey, that's great if that's what you want to do, but that's not very efficient. That's not very effective. And it can really lead to a clunky transition, or it can, just generally mess up the process, because now instead of using something that will easily integrate with, let's say, your invoicing, with your payroll company, with other systems in place that are going to help you better operate your business, instead of doing all of that, now you're sitting there and you're fighting against old technology and new ways to integrate. And this can lead into, a destruction or a serious reduction into anticipated profits. Because now you have to come in and retrain staff and do a whole lot of stuff that you just do you really want to take the time to do it? That's basically what it comes down to. So you want to make sure that during your due diligence process and your roadmap, when you're planning all of this integration out, that this is part of it, that you have in place or in mind at least, that if you like a particular scheduling software, make sure that you're ready for the day of the sale to start the migration process, to start the training on that new software, if it's one that they're not used to, especially if it's agencies that are still using, pen and paper or Excel files that are a little antiquated. And yes, for some of you watching this video, they're going to people really still do that? Absolutely. I actually very recently took on a client that when my team and I were going through some of their processes, they're they have no CRM for their sales. All they handed me was 3 boxes of paper where handwritten notes were kept and in lieu of a CRM. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it did make the transition very, very clunky, and it made our job as a consultant, it made my job a little bit harder because now I had to sit and dig through and make sure that we didn't miss anything along the way during our processes. So keep that all in mind. These are things to keep in mind and be mindful of. Number four, um, during during your integration process, you want to take a serious look at the brand identity and what the market messaging is. One of the big questions that I actually get quite a bit from people that are trying to buy or that are, they're trying to merge or acquire another company as part of their growth process is, should I rebrand or keep the name? Well, here's the thing. Rebranding creates unification if you're taking something over. So, let's say for example, I am ABC Home Care and I've just purchased XYZ Home Care. All right, or or home health or hospice or whatever or skilled nursing. I'm company A and I've bought company B. Company B, the benefits of keeping their name at least for a while after the purchase it it can create or maintain that goodwill process. It could preserve, referral brand loyalty. You know, it could cause it could create a lot of solutions. And I'm a big believer that it should always be a slower transition. You don't come in day one unless, okay, the only time you come in day one and just trash all the branding is if the company you're buying doesn't have a good reputation. And again, this is part of the due diligence process. There's always a reason why people sell. And one of the things that I have found and being involved in these types of things over the years is that when people are getting frustrated, tired, or burned out with the business and they're ready to sell it, a lot of things go by the wayside, and sometimes quality can suffer. And when quality suffers, so does reputation. All right, so these are all things how that you want to keep in mind when you're thinking of your integration process. If the company still has a solid reputation, then you want to make sure that your rebranding process is a little slower. All right, so that you can make sure that you get a positive perception from the uh that people have good outlooks, like clients, the referral partners, caregivers. A lot of times people misconceive a sale or a merger as instability or as that, oh, they're going to bring all new people in. I don't want to deal with new people. I'll just stick to another referral partner locally. You want to make sure that when you're introducing this entire concept and bringing it to market after you've purchased, that you have clear, clear story, that you have clear messaging, that your website, marketing materials, your brochures, your community messaging, all of this has been taken a look at. That it's all high quality, that it's all stable, that it shows some sort of improvement. You want to make sure that you are the one controlling the narrative, controlling the perception of others so that the brand and marketing message doesn't doesn't suffer in the process. And finally, number five, you want to make sure that you have very clear success metrics in place so that you can properly measure the return on your investment. So when you take over a new business, an existing business, the KPIs are going to tell the real story whether or not this acquisition or the merger was worthwhile. All right. So it's not just about top line revenue, but it's also about sustainable improvements. Like basically in if we were to take a look at this implementation process, this timeline, we need to make sure that, you know, what's our 90-day retention after purchase? Were we able to hold on to the majority of the clients? Were we able to hold on to the majority of the caregiving staff once the merger or once the acquisition was announced? What's it look like 6 months out? 3 months, 6 months, maybe 12 months out. You want to make sure that you're looking at all of these things. Your revenue, is it steadily growing or did you hit a brick wall? Or did you lose so many clients that you're not really seeing any growth? Is your market share, is your market share expanding or detracting? Like if yours this was a merger and let's say you were able to um, that you took over this company just to eliminate a competitor. Like you just made them an offer and you didn't want to, and you wanted the bigger market share that they had. Is that actually happening? All right. So is your caregiver satisfaction increased, decreased, or neutral? And what are the cost synergies between, your expectation and the reality? What about were you able to find savings or is it a bigger drain because of this merger? All of these things are things that you need to track and take a look at. You also want to keep an eye out for common red flags that, that are big indicators of post-deal inefficiency or something commonly known as post-deal drift. Okay, so that is all of a sudden you see overtime going through the roof. You see a big spike in turnover from your caregivers. You start hearing client complaints, missed billing cycles are being missed. This is especially important if your revenue management it gets out of whack, especially if you're doing like Medicaid or Medicare billing. It can really impact your operations, and you want to keep an eye on these things. You want to set up very clear and easy to measure KPIs that will help you understand these things better. All right. And that's all going to lead to be able, and this should be part of your plan, your roadmap, so to speak, for for your transition period post purchase. It's how do you correct it when these things aren't going right? So you want to make sure number one is that you're taking a look at your integration plan. You're engaging or re-engaging the leadership, the new leadership, the previous leadership. Don't be afraid to pause or reset parts of this transition if you have to. Like if you're seeing great success with your client acquisition, but you're not seeing client acquisition is improving, but previous client retention is going down, or you notice an overall dissatisfaction or sharp dissatisfaction a lot of times with legacy client satisfaction, we need to take a look at this. We may need to pause bringing in new clients until we figure out what's going on with our processes and why are clients all of a sudden unhappy. All right, so um, all of these things have to be taken into account, and these are only, five of what we consider some of the most important things to consider and strategies for integration post M&A process. All right. So just remember, just to recap, all right, your integration planning does not start the day you close. The planning should already have happened and been an ongoing process from the minute you sign that letter of intent and give your surety deposit. All right. So once that's all done, you should already have or start looking at how you're going to integrate your processes or integrate yourself if it's a standalone business purchase, right? You want to make sure that you're doing this at least 90 days out. If a little bit longer if your due diligence process started beforehand. All right. You want to take a look and make sure that you can fully integrate or that you have a clear understanding of what the staffing and culture is in the new purchase. All right. The key to retention and good morale is, understanding all of this. So you have to have your strategies and plans in place to retain the staff and manage any culture clashes that can happen. And all of that can easily be broken down or remedied in many cases with clear and transparent communication. You want to make sure that that you have a good overview and are able to properly align systems and operations. Is the new company you're taking over using outdated systems? Are they using systems that are far more advanced than yours? If it's a merger, how can you marry them so that you don't see a lot of a lot of clashing there, or that you don't see the need for a higher learning curve impact quality. So you want to make sure um, that if unification is your strategy, that you have a good plan in place. And that may mean running dual systems for a short amount of time. All right. You also want to understand very clearly your brand identity and the market messaging. When you go back out to market and it starts spreading that there's new ownership, whether it's a single unit purchase or if it's a merger or multi-unit expansion, it's, having an understanding of the brand identity and your marketing message will help you control the narrative. And if you can control the narrative, then you will be able to control people's perception of why this is happening and what's going on. And that all happens because you are understanding that success metrics are important to track because they're going to measure true ROI. What is a true return? And as I said earlier, KPIs will tell the real story. All right. Success is not always going to be measured at top line revenue. It's about your ability to sustainably and continually improve the business post transaction. Right. Keep an eye on if there's sudden spikes in overtime, sudden spikes in turnover, client complaints, if your A&R is out of whack, your AR is out of whack, all of this stuff. Make sure that you also have contingencies in place so that you can course correct immediately. So thank you guys for joining us, and don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a like. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And um, if you have any questions on anything that we've talked about or any suggestions for future videos, please feel free to leave us a comment below and let us know your thoughts. All right, we look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. Have a great weekend.